Hi, this is Janet Fitch, and it is noon on Wednesday, so that means it is Writing Wednesday, where I answer your writing questions, craft questions, psychological questions, the writer's life. It all is part of our lives, and whatever it is that you want to talk about, I am happy to talk about it. If you have questions for me in between Writing Wednesdays, send them to me through my website, janetfitchwrites.com, and I can craft a Writing Wednesday around your question. So believe me, if you have a question, there are a lot of other writers out there with exactly the same question. So it was interesting to see a program last night at the LA Public Library, the Aloud series, which always had, readings and stuff. They're trying something new where they're doing an evening grouped around a theme, and they've asked people from various different arts to come together around a theme and present information. And last night it was Rage, She Wrote. So it was about women and anger and the things, not only the things we're angry about, but more so how we think of anger, how we express anger, anger in our work. Is it something we get stuck in? Is it something that moves through us? How do you transmute your intense feelings into art? And they had a rapper, they had two novelists, an essayist, and a filmmaker. And the filmmaker, a woman named Nina, I want to say it was Mendez. Let's see, I have it written down. Has a film out on Canopy right now, which is the library streaming system. So if you have a library card, you can use Canopy. And she has a film called Brainwashed: Sex, Camera, and Power. Talking about how if the visual language of film, the language of the camera itself and how shots are framed, have a social, they weren't really able to dig it out last night, but the question as to whether or not that is does it create the culture of predation, the way things are filmed, or does it reflect the general view of women as objects to be harassed and predated upon? It was very interesting, and I can't wait to see the film. So it's called Brainwashed: Sex, Camera, Power. And she was extremely interesting. And the other person who was speaking that really interested me was the last reader, somebody named Soraya Chimali, essayist, who was saying, what is an angry woman look like? And she went, isn't that interesting? We always think of the angry woman with her snakes in her hair and, red face and screaming, kind of thinking of our mothers, generally yelling at us when we were tiny. But the average angry woman looks like this. So how do you tell the angry woman from the happy woman? Society makes it very hard to get a grip on that one. Just as a writer, it is so important just to get out and get some new ideas, drink in some smart, interesting ideas, library programs, museum programs. It was wonderful. Susan Straight, who is a novelist here in LA of my kind of literary generation, who is, I don't think of her as an angry person, but her children do. So, your kids really see where you live, right? Um, but her focus tends to be on real, the texture of reality and working people. Her new book, Mecca, is about the essential, quote unquote, workers during the pandemic, and, how people support each other. When you're broke, everybody kind of pitches in. It's funny. It's like rich people buy friends or buy help. You buy someone to lug the couch or whatever. And when you're a working person, if you're broke, you do not hire help. You turn to your friends. You turn to your community. And her work is so wonderful, Susan Straight. She is in California. People have come from other places often. They come here, they gravitate here, sometime. And she's very interested in the counter narrative to the American success story. The lone individual, the lone wolf who comes of age in some backwater place, traditionally it's Ohio, but it could be Wyoming, where did Gatsby come from? Wyoming, Montana? And the lone individual, goes to the big city, usually New York, and makes it on their own. And Susan, in this book, Mecca, presents a counter narrative, which is she is interested in not that individual who goes off to seek their individual fortune and leaves the community, but about the people who stay, the relationships that knit together, through thick and thin, the relationships that form generationally, where I know you're a kid, I know who you are, you watch out, I'm going to tell your grandmother. She's interested in community and how people, especially this narrative of the heroic individual, does not serve the working person, the average person, the, financially stressed person, who we require community. And how does that work in an emergency? How does that work? So Mecca, I highly recommend. It's Southern California, but it's not the Southern California of a Jackie Collins novel. It is not the the attractive Upper West. We have a West Side too here in Los Angeles. It's not about the affluent people. It's about the working people who stay in their community, who support each other. And, bad things happen, good things happen, and it's part of the community, not just any individual, because as an individual just wouldn't make it. You go down. So she read, and she didn't read. She talked about the people, actual women that she's known, and what things that they've actually been forced to do in their lives. It's talking about rage, killings, and she has a memoir called In the Country of Women, and some of this material is in The Country of Women, and some of it is in her other books. There's always, whenever you have desperation, you're one step from rage. You're one breathing space away from rage. And then Ivy Pachoda, who has a new book, a mystery that's up for the LA Times Book Prize, just announced today, Sing Her Down. deals with women who aren't composing their faces like this. They're not people who smile when things are going south. They're tough, 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 tough people. And we learn about ourselves through literature, through our various art forms, and that is a really interesting book. The language is different. The language of, anger is something that, here on Writing Wednesday, it's very important to differentiate, I do, between the writer, the person, and the writer, what's going on the page. And Writing Wednesday, we're more interested in what's going on the page, So to have therapy, things that work in real life, this is not what you want to see on the page. You want to see the naked thing itself. So to have your character, if your character is going to inhabit all of the whole piano, of human emotion and expression, anger is going to be part of it. And anger is such a force. It's a force. It can be destructive. It's neutral in a way. It can be destructive, or it can be a force of progress and moving forward. And it's why sometimes writers are, I shouldn't say unpleasant people, but we tend to be a little more naked in our acceptance of our own emotions, that we don't pack it down as much. It makes it hard as a family person, but that's the personal side of things. But as a writer, you need to be able to express the character's anger. The character's anger can drive quite a bit in your work. The character's unlikable, they're angry. They're so angry. It's like our job as a writer is to allow the reader to feel that anger and understand why the character is like that. So we're not standing outside the character going, they're not, I don't want to sit on the bus with them. I don't want to be at dinner with them. They're so angry. But if you can pull the reader inside the character, then they're going to be angry too. They're going to see what the problem is. They would be just as outraged as your character is, at the way they're being treated by, say, their loved one or, parent or child or something. And everybody knows what it feels like to be angry. But try to think about how the character's anger brings the reader in versus, and I hate you too, and you're an asshole too. It's like you want access. So people talk about this whole, my character, I can't have an angry character because they're so unlikable. Well, haven't you ever been mad at somebody? Haven't you ever almost had a fist fight in the parking lot of the Trader Joe's? It's relatable. So the idea is to make sure that you're bringing the reader inside, that they experience the insult, the being overlooked. There you are at the meeting, and you have just thrown out an idea, which has just been run over by everybody, and then somebody else, more favored by the system, will repeat your idea. And then everybody stops and says, oh my God, that is such a good idea. The anger, that anger, everybody's had that, don't you think? it's not necessarily an unlikable thing to have an angry character. We just have to understand who they are and why they're angry, and go along, be in them, be along with them, so that it's like you'd be crazy not to be angry. You'd be like on dope or something, not to be angry in that situation. Anger points out injustice. Anger points out people who have, for whatever reason, have taken it and taken it and taken it. And then, that's why we love all those, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore, even if it's completely destructive, like, a certain movement in this country. It's people who are fed up and they feel abused, and they're not going to take it anymore. Anger it feels like power. It is often it covers things. As writers, we want to, anger is considered not ladylike, but what's a lady? It's about boundaries, setting boundaries. People don't like people who set boundaries. People who say no when they want something. And the more entitled the other party is, the more conflict there's going to be at somebody saying no. So, even the lady as as some kind of an ideal, ladylike, there is an unspoken other who is saying what a lady is and what a lady should do, because I want you to do that. That's how I want you to be, because it makes more room for me to do whatever the hell I want to do. Ladies also have their own way of expressing anger. It's also an armor. Ladylike, somebody is being a real jerk, and you can bring, people can resort to a very, an extremely chilly, ladylike response. That's its own weapon, and women have used that for a long time. And I don't mean ladylike, like just smiling when you're mad, but there's a coolness of back off, buddy. Well, I would tend to disagree. There are different ways it's handled, and it depends on the character, how you want the character to handle their anger. Then there's your anger, which is a whole different matter. One's own anger. I have to, defer to your therapist or my therapist. Sometimes we just need help with anger. But anger management doesn't necessarily mean stuffing it down. My character has an anger problem. I even thought of calling my new book Anger Management. And you learn anger from parents, and how they dealt with their anger, how people use anger to control other people, the bully. It's extremely useful. I could tease it apart psychologically. A lot of what we experience as anger feels very powerful. You feel powerful when you're angry, right? And often what the anger covers is grief. And getting to the grief isn't always an important move. Am I giving too much away of my book? It's a big move when a character finds what's under the anger. Usually it's grief. And it's one of the things that we look at a lot in, everyday situations, is the grief that things are the way they are. because it's hard to walk around with a big head of anger all the time. It's exhausting. But Christy says, the rage of women has been the primary focus of my work the last 10 years. Quiet anger is loud. Politeness can have daggers. Yeah, and I think some of it is when we think we shouldn't be angry is where you get into problems, when you get tied into knots. You're trying to be so good, and you just get angrier and angrier because other people are not trying to be good. They're pissing you off. I'm trying so hard to be good, and they're not using the turn signal. I mean, I've been sitting here waiting for that guy to go past, and he's not turning, and he turned. It's like he's not following the rules. And the more you're a rule follower, the more angry you are. And sometimes that can be very dangerous. People turn on people. People explode out of seemingly nowhere because they're just sick of being good when nobody else is. Llewellyn says anger also covers insecurity. Yeah, because nobody wants to be called, especially if you're in danger of being exposed as to being not knowing or whatever. Somebody's calling you on one of your weak points. The anger can keep, it's like the squid's ink blob that they hide in. We hide in that anger. Anger hides loss of control, or is lack of control. But yeah, when you're losing control, the anger is a way of trying to get it again, for sure, and domestically, especially. Yeah, it's such a rich area of in fiction. Fear is also underlying anger. Yeah. Anybody who ever grabbed their kid out of the street and started screaming at the kid. It's a horrible thing, but it tends to happen because you were so afraid that they were going to get hit that you, instead of just like, thank God you're okay, it's like, because you were so afraid that that's how it comes out. This is the kind of thing that I wish I saw more in fiction. I don't see anger a lot. I see a lot of quarreling, like back and forth, this horrible dialogue where we're just, and you too, and I never like your mother, and your socks smell. But anger has phases that are really interesting when you see it on the page and you see the modulation. Say I'm mad, and then for a moment I kind of see your point, and I back, it falls again, and then you do something, you don't acknowledge that I'm backing off, and another swell comes, or I remember, the time that you borrowed my cocktail dress and ruined it. It's back up again. Yeah. Oh, Christy says, watching family anger in sessions and the various ways it is expressed among each other can be an amazing dance. It's so subtle. And what a good scene to watch the anger and watch it move around the room. Who, mom is in the corner smiling her anger, and the kid is being, super rude, and the husband is going through his phone, just he's angry, but he doesn't want to be seen as losing control. So he's just scrolling through his phone. Anybody see that? So interesting. Watch eyes and mouths. Yeah. And this is notebook stuff. Write an anger page on your notebook, an anger section. And then, like, when you're watching movies, stop and See somebody who's yelling. There's always somebody yelling in a TV show. Stop it and describe the eyes, describe the mouths, describe the facial expression, describe the gestures. And you can use them in your work. You use them anywhere. Restraint is interesting. Yeah. Restraint is interesting. Actors will say silence. If a character falls silent, whoever makes the silence controls the scene, not the person who's yelling. So that's interesting to know as you're writing an anger scene. Restraint is interesting, especially if they're really angry. The person who's very cold in their affect when they're angry is a terrifying figure. Bozena says, anger is the fast way, more primal, primitive. Politeness requires time, effort, and dedication. And it's not as interesting on the page, if we're talking about fiction. It is, you want a variety. You want variety when you are writing fiction. So the more kinds of anger, the more the way different people handle it, or the same person in different situations handles it, makes for really good fiction. So study it a little bit more. Study the ebb and flow of your own anger, how it rises and falls, what kind of things trigger it, who pisses you off, what pisses you off in a normal day. And keep it in your, what I do is I collect these little notebooks. I write down these little notebooks I carry with me. And then I put it on my computer in a file called Notebooks. I'll take these, because I won't be able to read this in a month, and I'll never open this again. This is just, so I get it out of here, I get it onto my computer, and then when I have, like a good couple of pages of accumulated data, I'll print it out 3-hole punch and put it in my ring binders, because you will want these all your life. You're always going to write about anger, and you need to be able to, you go to that section of, usually it might be under portraits, a subcategory of portraits or emotions, and you go to your anger section, and you want some gestures, you want some extra detail for a scene, and it'll be right there. Christy says, The Wilds, an excellent film to watch groups of anger and the untangling of societal training. Really interesting. Yeah. Politeness requires time, effort, and dedication. Some people just aren't angry people. Some people are just mild in their affect. And when they get mad, it's stunning. My dad was like super chill. Nothing fazed him. His wife was very volatile. His daughter was very volatile. And he was extremely chill. When he got angry, it was, you knew you'd gone too far, because that was a rare animal. And when you were citing it, it was just like, okay, oh my God, back off, back away from the wreck. So yeah, politeness requires time, effort, dedication, and politeness is there's manners. So people can be, all kinds of people can have really good manners. People, real bitches, can, bless their heart, they can have very good manners, covers up a lot of stuff. But it also shows sometimes a very kind and compassionate side of some people. Not everybody anymore bothers to cultivate good manners. So that shows something about them to begin with, that they care. A person who will get up and let somebody have their seat on the bus or the subway. I remember going to New York and meeting my agent for the first time, and the building had one of those revolving doors, which I'd never seen. I'm from California. We just don't have them. And it was winter, and he stepped out first, pushed the door to start it, and then stepped back so I could go through without fighting to start the door. I don't think he even thought about it. I don't think he even had one single thought about politeness or manners. It was so deep in his personality that he just did it. He didn't expect applause, just a way of life. I was so impressed by that because I'd never seen that before. Somebody who will let you in traffic, So this is not anger. But then we have road rage, what goes on. I mean, take notes on anger this week. Just road rage situation. There was a guy in a writing class, a writing group I was in very early on, who had a book called Zen Driving, and how to drive in a Zen way, which we spend a lot of time in our cars here in LA, especially if you are a commuter. And instead of hating every freaking person on the road and trying to keep them from getting in front of you, and because what does that mean to you, that you're so angry that they get in front of you? You feel that people are getting in front of you in life, and you have a big machine here, and you're not going to let them get away with it. Think of all the shootings, the road rage shootings. You kill somebody because they got in front of you in traffic? Really? Think how beleaguered. I once was in New York and I saw two women fist fighting, and I don't mean young women. I mean women, in their 40s, fist fighting in the subway. Hitting each other. Strangers hitting each other in the subway because one woman was leaning on the pole. And in New York, you do not lean on the pole. Any New Yorkers here? You do not lean on the pole because 8 people could hold the pole if you weren't leaning on it. So it's not a thing. It's not done. But one woman was leaning on the pole, and this other woman got into it with her, and they were punching each other. It was the most disgraceful thing I ever saw. It was just like, and then I realized, think how beleaguered both of them must be in their private lives. They're both stressed to the max to get into a fight about this. And I felt so sorry for them both. It was disgraceful, but it was also, kind of tragic that ordinary middle-aged women would be so stressed out that they would fight about this. So anger is also tells you so much about the internal state. The actions around anger tell you so much about the inner states of people who your character might not know who they are or why they are like this. But how do they react, to the anger? Some people can't stand for anybody to be angry, I know someone, if you raise your voice around this person, they think you're screaming. I came from a household of screamers, to me, I don't really hear it like that. But, some people can't hear it at all. It's like the dogs, you get from the pound, and anybody raises their voice, the dog just starts shaking and shitting on the floor. It's like, wow, okay, something's happened to this dog. And the city is full of people like that. Desperation. And then Llewellyn says, what about righteous anger? Righteous anger it's It's a feeling of power. It's a feeling of being right, which is so powerful. There's a lot of assumptions, there's righteous anger that can be wrong as well as right. I mean, you've seen people get up their nose about something in righteous anger. They like the feeling of being of righteous anger, because then they are the Cape Crusaders, rather than wondering, gee, what's happened to you that you're doing this? Personally, I'm always wary of righteous anger. That's why I hate the internet and how fast righteous anger is like hair trigger, rather it's a feeling of power that is so much easier in some ways than understanding something and being forced to understand. This is the thing about being a writer that I think many of you might understand, is how hard it is to say, oh, you are at fault, you are at fault. Because as writers, we often see other people's points of view better, and and readers do too. We're a little bit more able to see an entire situation, so we often go to despair more than righteous anger, which, is not to say, there's a time and a place for righteous anger. In our fiction, we want to see somebody say enough, or see something that's not right, not fair, and step up. I think there's a human virtue in responding to a bad situation and stepping up. So there's all kinds of anger. But righteous anger, you can see how it could work either way, depending on the situation. Christy says, we embrace anger. It can drown us deeply. Anger is safety. Yeah, as long as you stay angry and don't see the consequences of that anger, of your own anger. Easier to see somebody else's. Yeah, I have a scene in what I'm working on now that has a character who has just gone off the deep end and had a big physical breaking and smashing type of, violent outburst. And then later on has to see the damage they've done, not only to physical objects, but just the display of anger, how that has shaken everybody in their environment. And then it comes back at them. It doesn't just disappear when I stop being angry. Then you see the wreckage in other people, which is interesting. It has that response. So, study it, watch it. Watch it in your family, watch it in yourself. Keep track in your films, movies, books. How is anger handled? When do you feel it yourself, and when are you kind of watching it and going, ugh, I can't stand this person. It's just walking around with a head of steam, and they don't have any variation. If you're looking for I've got the unlikable character problem, it's often that the character seems to be unidirectional. They're angry, but they're not, they're never joyful. They're only angry all the time. That's unlikable. If they're interesting, that'd be interesting. If you can keep the reader engaged in some way. But usually it gets tiring because it's just the single emotion. Llewellyn says Rosebud, finding the source. If you live in a city, you're going to see anger more than maybe than in the country, because there's more space. When people are crammed together, they get on each other's nerves. If you look at Yiddish, the language has so many words for how people are annoying, because where that language developed, people were crammed in to small living quarters, living on top of each other. And of course, you're going to have the Aleutians would have, the Inuit have so many words for snow. And if you're living cheek by jowl with a lot of people, your language develops a lot of words for and nuances of how people can be irritating. So let's, we can think about that. How are people irritating in your book and in your life? Let's see. And women, anger of women is something that is still being unpacked in literature. It's a newer subject for literature. Let's see, there was another. Zuned says, I was always drawn to the Dr. Philism that depression is anger turned inwards. Yeah, I think so. There's anger. Depression is when you stomp that down. And then, when you turn it outwards, then you murder people. It's like that suicide is the end, when depression is at its final stage. You kill the self or you kill the other person. And that's a temperamental thing of how interior you are. Yeah. And then if you're looking for the heart of darkness in your novel and you have a depressed character, it's when you get through their depression and find the anger. There's going to be a big turn in your book when you get to that place. It's just like if you're the angry person, when you get to the place where you discover the grief under the anger, then you get a turn. So that's a good practice for the week, is to think about the different ways that anger is expressed in fiction and how it develops inside yourself, where you get angry in a day, a week, and then also noticing its manifestation visually when you're watching a TV show or a movie, stopping it and making sure, see what the gestures are, see what the facial expressions are, the eyes, the mouth, and give it language. So this is not just about noticing. This is finding the language to express that impression, what you're seeing. And then you can do that, maybe take a week and do another emotion. What does joy look like? I mean, joy is so, the way they do it in movies is people applaud, which I just hate. It's such a cliche. So when things are pleasant, you usually have more cliches involved. It takes more work to do something interesting with joy or happiness that keep it out of the Hallmark card, Hallmark movie, sentimental, stitchery kind of language. I know when I'm working on something that something good happens to my character, and I gotta work really, really hard to make sure that it doesn't become heartwarming. That's like the review you don't want. You never want to see heartwarming on your story or your book. I mean, it's just like treacle, you always want to have a little bit of pepper in there and keep it unique and lively and spicy. So anyway, do we have any other questions? So this is your anger week. Just explore it, think about it. Think about how anger is expressed in books. Some books, ask yourself, is there anger there? Like Markson, I think even Markson, who it's single sentences, usually around a topic like, it'll be like music, literature, and anti-Semitism, and it's like in the factuality of so-and-so was an anti-Semite, so-and-so is an anti-Semite, blah, blah, blah. As you go down, the anger, you start to feel the anger of the noticing. If you read Bolaño's 2666, and there is a huge section of this, maybe 50 pages, enumerating the murders of women on the border from the maquiladores, like 50 pages. He doesn't say, I'm so angry. It's just the simple listing of the names. The anger is right there. So even in mentioning things, you don't have to say how angry your character is. You want to show you want to have an interesting expression of the anger on that character in a way that resonates inside. We've had this conversation about sadness, and the important thing in a sad scene is to not have your character cry. You want to make the reader cry. My husband's a comedy writer, and he says you don't have the actors laugh. If you have the actors laugh, it saves the audience the trouble. So what you want is your characters to, comic characters, to completely believe their situation and have the audience laugh. So the same thing with anger. How can you write about anger, your character's anger, in a way that makes the reader angry? All right. Well, thank you. How do you show passive-aggressive anger? It depends on if we are the passive-aggressive character, or is this somebody else? So it's who's your point of view? The passive-aggressive character point of view will be probably unreliable. Oh, I didn't mind at all. Oh, Jeff, that was just Jeff being Jeff, as he always is, with his muddy shoes and his overly loud outfits, So we see the unreliable of the passive stance. When it's another character, usually the anger is the point of view character. If you ever dealt with a passive-aggressive person, you're the one getting angry. And they're the ones, it's like, gotcha. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming for Writing Wednesday. Go off and explore your angry side. All right. Thanks. Bye.